Can you believe I actually had sex with a werewolf? And it was because we thought we were going to die anyway. Chapter 31. The temperature in the room seemed to be rising, though I couldn't be certain without a clock to track time. My eyes kept darting to Ryder, who lay motionless on the bed, appearing unaffected by the warmth that was making me increasingly uncomfortable. Unlike me, he showed no signs of wanting to shed layers or douse himself with ice water. This realization made me even more anxious, as it became clear that this was a problem unique to me, not an issue with the room's thermostat. My mind raced with possibilities. Had KOS treatment been too late? Was this an infection setting in? I unwrapped my fingers to inspect them, but they seemed normal, no unusual warmth. Swelling. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. However, my lack of medical knowledge left me feeling uncertain and vulnerable. I rewrapped them and tried to focus on the coolness of the floor against the back of my legs through the borrowed pants, seeking any relief from the growing discomfort. Ryder sat up and began eating some of the extra food that had been brought in. I closed my eyes, hoping it might alleviate the sensation, but it only served to heighten my awareness of my body. The warmth, I realized, was emanating from deep within my belly, and widened. My mind conjured an image of Ryder sitting on my couch, panting from our passionate kisses. The memory of how he had looked at me then sent a shiver through my body. My legs instinctively pressed together at the thought. "Are you doing okay over there?" Ryder's voice cut through my reverie, his tone laced with concern. Caught off guard, I forced my eyes open and plastered a smile on my face. "Perfectly fine," I replied, wondering if my voice sounded as strange to him as it did to me. "Are you sure?" His observant nature picking up on my discomfort. I was nodding when I saw him take a deep breath. Suddenly, Ryder became very, very still. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I whispered, my anxiety spiking. He took another breath, as if trying to compose himself, then carefully set aside his spaghetti, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You really must hate me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What's wrong? My heart racing. There was a brief moment of hesitation, barely noticeable but unmistakable. His teeth grazed his lower lip before quickly releasing it. "You're going into heat, Georgia." His calm demeanor barely masking the tension in his voice. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What? Like a dog? Minus the blood. It won't change your cycle, obviously. Like that was the important part. But, inhuman, I protested. You're being absurd. You need to call Keiko because I have an infection. But I didn't. Did I? I was the doctor, but something in me told me that he was right. I can't call her because I gave them my cell phone before they shoved us in here. And even if I could call Keiko, there's nothing she could do for you because this isn't a fever. You might be a human, but the moon goddess mated you to a werewolf and the moon goddess decides whenever you go into heat. What the fuck is heat? I demanded. It's the moon goddess's way of bringing us together. With werewolves, markings and matings increase the bond between us. So basically, the heat strongly encourages sex in an effort to get us to become more bonded to each other. Some couples go through it dozens of times. Some never go through it at all. His words were all calculated and formal, but his knee was bouncing and his fingers were twitching. So, what do we do? Since we are literally trapped in one room together, I don't think we have a lot of options. The best deterrent is usually distance, and that's not helpful for us. The hormones are going to get worse. I'm going to start feeling a little. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The heat you're experiencing now is going to get more uncomfortable to the point that you will start begging and will not go away until we find a way to subdue it. I will never beg. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. And by subduing it, you mean having sex? It's the most traditional method, yes. And when we were at my house, playing video games and things got all heated, that worst heat, I almost marked you. It's a bite on the neck to signify that we are mates. If you rejected me or weren't my mate, the mark wouldn't scar over and heal properly. But if you accepted it, it would have been a sign. He inhaled sharply, and I marveled at the way his chest rose and fell. Christ, you smell so fucking good. The tone of his voice, the way his throat worked as he swallowed hard, it made me squirm on the floor a little. He was kidding. Would it be so bad if we let the sea run its course? My voice so quiet. You don't know what you're saying. It's the heat talking. But his tongue darted out to lick his lips. At least, not yet, but I could feel it getting stronger with every passing second. My skin was on fire. My mouth watered at the sight of him. I thought of his eyes taking in every inch of my body. What difference does it make? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. We might not be live in 24 hours. It doesn't have to mean anything. If you want me, that is. A hand scraped through his hair. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. I want you. You're my mate. Do you know how hard it was to stop myself at your house? Do you know how badly I wanted to mark you, then drag you to your bedroom? You won't have to stop this time. I whispered, rising to my feet. I took slow, smooth steps towards him. I didn't know if I was swaying my hips more or if he just couldn't keep his eyes off my form now. I didn't care. I loved having his gaze on me, suddenly so hungry. When I reached him, I placed one hand on his shoulder and leaned down until my lips were hovering just beside his ear. I want it just as bad as you do. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. His hands grabbed my hips and pulled me down until I was sitting across his lap. I could feel how hard he was before my lips even met his. There was no room for gentleness and giddy nervousness here. We agreed. We were taking what we needed. From his mouth to his hands, it was all fast and rough. I scraped my remaining nails against the back of his neck. His mouth slanted across mine. I bit his lip. He gripped my body against his. My top came off at some point. So did his. I was sure when. The only part I could distinctly remember at that point was feeling his hand wrap around my throat, so domineering and strong despite the fact that he never used any force. He would whisper orders. I would tell him my demands. Neither of us felt inclined to deny. Sometimes he would even pause to smirk up at me. He told me to take off my bra. I did. I only had to glance at his pants before he was stripping them off for me. In the darkness of my bedroom, I had promised that I would learn what every inch of him tasted like. I didn't care about that now. The need was growing stronger with every passing second. My body was thrumming with it. Every second that passed that I didn't have him inside me was too long. If he felt my franticness or didn't like my pace, he didn't say anything. Once we were both there, he wasted no time. I was flat on my back with my legs around his waist when he plunged inside me. Words got caught in my mouth, stalling in my brain. All that poured out of my mouth were moans. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It was unimaginable. To have him fill me up, to be inside me. It made my head whirl. He was fast and rough, just like everything else had been. I could focus on nothing and everything all at once. The way his skin felt beneath my palms. The way he growled when I gripped his hair. How perfectly he fit inside me. It was all bliss. Each thrust brought me closer, the pleasure building at the base of my spine. my legs tight and around his waist, trying to pull him in tighter, trying to touch every inch of him all at once. I was on the brink, ready to crest with him. And he slowed. His body lowered closer to mine, just hovering so I could feel him without bearing any of his weight. I felt the tip of his nose carefully trace the line from my chin to my jaw, heard his breath tremble, and I knew exactly what he was thinking. His eyes must have been closed. He must have been thinking about this. With me, but not here, pretending that we were lovers, that he confessed what he was while we had been free and I had led him to my bedroom anyway. If I closed my own eyes, I could see it too. It was beautiful. Perfection. He pulled away. Then he rolled me over so I was face down on the bed. He took me from behind. I gripped the sheets like I was holding on for dear life. He was relentless. And the sounds he made, Christ, they almost drove me to madness. I showed him that I loved everything he was doing by pushing my hips back onto him, letting myself make sounds that crossed between moans and screams and demanded everything from him. He gave me everything he could until I was shuddering and withering beneath him. He pulled away from me then. I rolled to face him. We don't have any condoms. I didn't want to. I pushed him onto his back before he could finish and took him in my mouth. The curses that poured from him would have made me quirk an eyebrow at him had I not been so focused on his taste. I suppose our taste now. I didn't stop until he was a panting mess and the heat boiling within me settled. Chapter 32. Coming down from the heat felt like waking up from a fever dream. One moment, nothing was more pressing than pleasing the man before me. Watching him shake and buckle for me was exquisite. The next, I was putting my clothes on, realizing that I had let a man who was pretty much a stranger see me completely bare. I mean, at one point, I felt like he wasn't a stranger at all. I felt like I knew him damn well and he knew me better than anyone else on the earth. Which was saying much at this point. But still, are you doing okay? Tugging his pants up his muscular thighs. Yeah. Realistically, it was odd and I knew I should have felt a dozen things. Shame. Embarrassment. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobin. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Maybe even a little bit of anger towards the moon goddess. But I didn't. It was done. You don't regret it. Not he answer was me did. But honest. Do you? Of course not. Ryder murmured. I would never admit it out loud. But it was a relief to hear. So once was enough to get it out of your system. Ryder didn't even pretend to crack a smile. Mercury eyes swept up and down my form. The clothing that I had put back on didn't seem to matter anymore. It was like he could see every curve, every line of my body, like he had committed all of me to memory already. 1,000 times could never be enough. He rumbled. My cheeks flushed. Having him once, knowing the sounds he made, how he could move so forcefully and so tentatively all at once, only made me want him more. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobin, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I wanted to explore him, figure out where I could kiss him to make him weak in the knees, how I could move to ensure that he would pull my hair just hard enough. I'm going to assume that was your first time. This time, he rose and took my usual spot against the wall, allowing me to sit on the bed, a gift to my tailbone. I snorted. What are we? 12. Virginity is irrelevant. But, if you must know, you are definitely not my first sexual partner. I will say, you are my first werewolf though. He let out a laugh at that. It hit me straight in the stomach. The butterflies that I thought would never come back to life fluttered so beautifully for his voice. I guess he was kidding about the sex strengthening the bond. And was I your first? Though the answer was entirely clear. No virgin would be so confident. It took practice to be that confident with a new partner and to communicate wants and needs. Well, mating is sacred to werewolves. He began, and when I cocked a knowing eyebrow at him. But no, you aren't my first either. To be fair, all I can think about now is that anyone and anything before was completely inadequate. I don't even have the words. It shouldn't have bothered me. It was unfair that it bothered me. To my agent extraordinaire, Werewolf, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But knowing that his hands had been on another woman, knowing that someone else might have whispered his name during sex, it twisted something deep inside me, and like the hypocrite I was. If it's sacred, why didn't you choose to wait? You know, if it was the norm. I watched tried to deflate right then. His broad chest seemed to curl in on itself, chin tick down, no longer able to meet my eyes. The silence carried on for far too long and was far too heavy before he said, "It's just what I became after my parents were killed." We talked about my job with the bike company. I was on track for a good life. Maybe not a world-changing life, but a good one. Then, I came home for family supper one day and there they were. His breath seemed to get stuck in his chest, his hands curling into fists. My mom was face down with a knife at her back. My dad, they had bashed in his skull so badly, I didn't want to picture it. But I could, because I had done things like that. I had been fortunate or unfortunate enough to only ever target werewolves in their wolf form. But I had heard the cries of other wolves. I had taken a life by any means necessary. Even if that wolf had a family. Even if it didn't know that it could cause wolf, drain in humans. To my agent extraordinaire, Werewolf, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. After I found my parents, I kind of fell apart. I left the pack I was on and moved to the city. It was awful. I had nightmares about what happened to them. Thought I saw them in strangers every time I went to the store. Blamed myself for not being there. Worried if I was next. It felt like there was no escaping it. So when I started drinking myself to oblivion and taking girls home and those feelings went away, I kept doing it. "That's why you don't drink," I whispered, thinking about how he declined going to a brewery with me. Right. It was awful. I woke up in the morning feeling my organs ache. The friends I had before the murders couldn't stand to see me kill myself. The new friends I accumulated only wanted to spend time with me if I was wasted and paying for their drinks. I was getting tested every week to make sure I hadn't picked up anything. When he saw me tense. "I'm clean. How did you stop?" I wondered. "I mean, I think it's amazing that you did. But if it was the only thing making you feel better, it must have been really hard to let it go." It was. He agreed. Keiko came to check up on me. She wanted to make sure that I hadn't left my pack because of mismanagement or something. She showed up at my door 8 months pregnant and was just so kind. Honesty. I couldn't see the woman who ripped out my nails being kind, but said nothing. She listened to everything I said. She didn't get angry or frustrated when I told her that I couldn't stop. She just listened to me for hours on end. And then, at the end, she gave me purpose. She gave me a job. A one-time deal where I had to prove myself, and I did. Because I knew if I failed going back, nothing was going to bring my parents back. But I could help others. I gave it all up. I did everything I could to be the best that I could be. Which must sound crazy. No, I understand. I assured. I knew that I would have broken every one of my bones if it made them better. Made me stronger. And now I'm mated to a woman who had buried her own knife in someone's mother or father. My mouth fell open to defend myself. My parents were alive. Yes, but had zero quality of life because of his kind. Just because we had sex didn't mean he could continue tossing barbs at me. Hell. The sex had made me more tender. But there was a shuffle outside. A few sets of footsteps were coming for us. Ryder was on his feet instantly. His nostrils flared as if he was trying to scent who was on the other side of the door. I hadn't been afraid, but watching his entire body become rigid and lethal, I got to my own feet, and became entirely aware that to defend myself with other than a pillow, against a werewolf, I doubted it would do much. The lock slid, and Ajax appeared. "Hello, friends. I see we haven't killed each other yet. Definitely a surprise for me." Grinning, Ryder slumped with relief and turned back to me. leaving his back to his king while the monarch surveyed the cell, casually ambling closer to Ryder. You were going to say something. Maybe argue with me. Ryder pressed. Whatever understanding we had had before, whatever sympathy had been in the air, evaporated then. My teeth clenched. It was Ryder that continued to speak, no longer directed at me though. The sneer was gone and, in its place, panic. What the hell? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. When he tried to jerk away from Ajax, I saw that his wrist was bound by a gleaming cuff and Ajax was making quick work of the other one. Even as Ryder began thrashing. Ryder was a lean man, firm muscles on a tall frame, but, as per the animal kingdom, the bigger, brawn-eye ones rose to the top, and I doubted there were many creatures on this earth that could put up a fair fight to the king. With at least 40 pounds and a few inches on Ryder, Ajax held my mate in place, which meant that Judgment Day was here for me. Chapter 33. I was trapped prey. Nothing more. I had no weapons, no escape, no plans. I could only watch as the massive man, even larger than Ajax, came into the cell. The hair on my arms rose, my body prickling with discomfort. Like even my organs knew I was somewhere I was supposed to be, too close to something that was too strong. But I had seen this man before, and I remembered feeling similarly then. He had come into the CAF and I had been stunned by how large he was. No amount of smiling could cover whatever it was about him that made me uncomfortable then. But I knew now. It was power. Power that gleamed in his eyes. The irises the color of blood. When he had come into the CAF he must be been wearing contacts. And if his eyes were red, unlike anything I had ever seen, he must have been the creature that chased me out of the royal lands. Hades. Hades was calm, seeming almost apologetic as he approached me. I don't know what I expected, but this man wearing a t-shirt and basketball shorts with hair wet from a recent shower was not it. He certainly felt the part of an old god, ready to slice life away. It just seemed like he didn't want to look at beyond the features that nature already gave him. And, while he was the picture of calm, Ryder was losing it more and more. Get the fuck away from her, he snarled. I could have imagined his teeth bared and eyes wild. I could hear his shoes squeaking on the floor as he failed to pull away from Ajax's silver cuffs and tight grip. But I didn't pull my eyes away from Hades for a second. I saw you, I whispered, the words barely leaving my lips as I stepped backwards. I saw you in the woods that day. You could have killed me. I had thought about the encounter hundreds of times, confused about how the animal seemed to always stay the perfect distance away. Now, seeing how fast wolves could really run when threatened or hunting, I knew that he had been toying with me. The corner of Hades' mouth quirked up in the feeble street smile. I chased you away. I wanted you to leave and be frightened enough that you didn't come back. Trespassers are often bad news and usually not treated kindly. It was a warning. I didn't want to hurt you. The words were kind, but the steps he was taking towards me were purely predatory. There was a grunt from behind him. Hades. Ryder barked. I swear to fucking God, I will kill you if you touch her. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. Please, Ajax begged, for the love of all that is holy. Hades. Hurry up. It was then that I realized that Hades had so perfectly guided me into a corner. I was pinned without him even having to put his hands on me, trapped ever so perfectly for him. We don't even know if this is going to work. I'd only tried it a couple of times before. Just do it. Enthusiasm, Ajax ordered. Right. Hades turned back to me, offering that apologetic smile. Sorry. Let's just get this over with. For how gentle and smooth his words were. His movements were sudden and sharp. I only managed to suck in a small breath before he grabbed both of my wrists in one of his hands, pulling my arms to one side of my chest and pinning them against my collarbone. A knee was pressed between my thighs, forcing my legs apart and unbalancing me. As sympathetic as he was, he knew how to fight and he certainly knew how to restrict. I could not kick or knee him. I couldn't claw at his face or swing out a solid punch. I couldn't even thrash about. Short of biting him, I had nothing to use against him. "I'm going to kill you, Hades," Ryder bellowed, so loud I wondered if the floor shook. "You won't be the first to try," Hades sighed, not nearly loud enough for anyone else to hear. His hand came up. I flinched away as best as I could, but wasn't able to make it very far. I felt all the air rush out of me when his palm pressed softly against my neck. Then his eyes began to change, though certainly red. They had begun as the shade of old bricks on a building, brown beneath all of redness, still unnatural and bizarre, but earthy, like rare clays found beneath the soil. And slowly, a bloodier shade took over, flickering across his irises, lighting and fading at varying rates. I felt my heartbeat thunder away under his palm but was almost hypnotized by his gaze. Fascinated. "Hades," Ryder thundered. The color slid back to brick as he let out a hiss of breath between his clenched teeth. The concentration resumed despite all of the threats coming from Ryder and the cursing coming from Ajax. Blood filled those eyes again, fuller and stronger than last time. Hades parted his lips, his gaze insane, but I saw the teeth in his mouth. I saw the sharpened edges, the eye teeth that had been much shorter when he smiled at me. I repressed a shriek, tears filling my own eyes. This was it. This was how I was going to die. Trapped in a cell with one man desperately trying to protect me, another struggling to keep his community safe, and Hades, the ruler of the underworld who had deemed me unworthy. This was what I had been waiting for all this time. It didn't seem to matter who ripped my throat out and who sucked my life force from me. As long as I was removed from this world, I didn't feel panic like I thought I would. And I didn't think about my parents or the other werewolf hunters. I didn't think about the humans that I fought so hard to protect. I didn't think about how my life had fallen apart after the werewolves had ripped the life out of my mom and dad. I thought about Ryder, sitting on the floor, talking about his mother. He found her, in a pool of her own blood. His father was killed in unspeakable ways. I hadn't put the knife in her back. I hadn't crushed his father's skull. But I had wielded enough knives and loosed enough arrows to fill a cemetery. I had taken mothers and fathers away from their children. I had broken siblings' hearts. I had ripped apart strong families, lifelong friendships, budding romances. I had taken souls off this earth. I had killed. The arm that had been keeping me pressed against the wall slackened. My eyes flashed up to Hades. He blinked several times, his eyes returning to their almost brown color as he stepped away from me. With his lips parted, I could see that his teeth had returned to normal. Ryder let out a feral snarl and I saw him jerk so hard against the handcuffs that Ajax gritted his teeth and dug his heels in. "Were you able to see anything?" Ajax asked, still straining as Ryder thrashed and fought. Hades blinked again, still seemed dazed. "Yeah. Yes. I was able to get some images." Ads prompted, frustration clear in his voice. "I can't. There's no reason to kill her. She doesn't feel bad. She doesn't feel bad." Hades straightened, chin raising. "Her intentions aren't bad. There's no ill will, no satisfaction from it. She's killing us." Ajax protested, letting out a grunt when Ryder landed a well, aimed it just above the knee. "I can't kill someone because they are misguided." Hades shot back, "Given what I saw, killing her won't solve anything. Are you actually serious right now?" Hades ignored him, attention solely on me for a moment, which was impressive considering it would take one wrong move from Ajax and Ryder would be lunging right for him. "What happened to your parents?" "So that's it," Ajax demanded before I could answer. "We just let her walk out of here. You asked me for my judgment and I have given it," Hades stated, sounding a little more like an old god than someone who looked to be in their 20s. The sentence was given, Axe crumpled with defeat, while Ryder stilled with relief. "I'm going to let you go now," Ajax said, "but if you still feel brave enough to go after Hades, I'm not going to bandage you up afterwards. It was only when I heard the click of the cuffs that I inhaled deep enough to smell something awful. My stomach twisted, ready to spew the spaghetti that Keiko had brought us all that time ago. As Ryder's wrist fell to his sides, I saw what I had been smelled. He had used all the force he could to try and get to me. In doing so, he had torn the skin on his wrists, blood trickling down his hands into his palms. But what I smelled was the pink flesh, the skin that had been burned by the silver cuffs that Ajax was carefully wrapping in a cloth. And I was left in a room with the king I had shot, a beast who decided death, and a man who had ripped his own flesh apart for me. Chapter 30. For no one had the energy to squabble. There was no arguing with Hades, it seemed. Whatever he was, whatever he represented to them, was not something they wanted to tamper with. Ryder didn't go after Hades. Ajax didn't go after me. I stared at Ryder, stared at the wrists that had suffered the brunt of his fighting. He had done that. And I had no doubt in my mind that, had Ajax not been holding him, he would have lunged for Hades. I did doubt that the lean and lanky man could have done anything to the hulking creature who continued to study me, though. But he would have tried. I didn't know if that delighted me or horrified me. On one hand, someone had fought so hard. Someone had wanted to keep me alive. On the other hand, he would have been slaughtered and fuel for even thinking he could do any damage to someone so much larger and so skilled. And now, that I was out of immediate danger, he couldn't even force him gaze to me. So what do we do with her now? Ryder demanded into the silent holding cell. I don't know, Ajax confessed. I feel there is not much that can be done right now. We are running a little hot. It might be best to take a step back. No one argued with the king. Taking a step back then meant all of us climbing into the vehicle that brought us here in the first place. Enthusiasm, Ajax was naturally behind the wheel, but it was Ryder who climbed into the passenger seat. I didn't want to admit it or even acknowledge it, but something struck a chord with that. Then 24 hours ago, we were a tangled mess together. He had touched me in places that no one else had explored. Sure, it had only been because neither of us assumed we would make it out alive. But this felt wrong, cold even. And what was worse, was the fact that I then ended up sitting next to the man who had been sent to kill me. I pretended none of it bothered me in the slightest and climbed into the vehicle. I sat beside the man who only had to make 1 minute ago to end my life. The one man that the werewolves seemed content to let play God. He could have killed me. Ajax had wanted him to kill me. I kept my gaze trained forward. I was alive. That was what mattered. I was going to see another day. The drive was quiet for the most part. Ryder was wrapping his wrists with bandages that Ajax had provided because, clearly, Ryder was never a target and clearly, they knew what wolves did when mates were threatened. Ajax was focused on the road, but every so often, I caught his eyes in the rearview mirror. I tried not to think about what he was looking for. I knew some of these roads. I knew the mountains that loomed over us and the forests that were filled with cottonwoods and old growth. This place had become my home, the little town and all the wildest that refused to be tamed under a human thumb. Now, seeing it from the back seat of someone else's vehicle, knowing that it had never belonged to me, it all seemed so different. The branches didn't bow to anyone, and if I hadn't come out of that holding cell alive, the ponds nor the sky would have noticed. We returned to the log cabin. Ryder didn't come to me when I slipped out of the SUV, almost crumpling on legs that felt like jelly. I didn't know if I was still suffering from what had transpired in that dreaded shed, or if I was now reacting to my near-death experience. Either way, he didn't blink. I repressed a sharply worded comment and straightened. Enthusiasm, Ajax was the first to enter the home. Keiko was in the open area, singing along to a classic Disney song from the couch with Clementine, a laptop on her knees. The pricey computer was slammed shut as we entered and she was on her feet in an instant. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. You're back, she gasped, darting towards him already. Her arms were open as if she were ready to embrace him. Something sickly and doubly uncoiled in my belly and I felt like burying my teeth at her. Thankfully, I didn't have to do that because her eyes landed on me. It was a quick change. The arms dropped, her shoulders rolled back, her chin ticked up. My, it seems that you're all back. And in one piece. Hades cowled and do it. Ryder grumbled. Like he hadn't been snarling and roaring the entire time that Hades had his hands on me. Cowled and wouldn't very different things. Hades said evenly. His voice was as firm as it had been when he announced that I was not to die. I just wondered if the others saw the confusion in his face when he glanced at me. You asked me for my judgment and I gave it. She has done bad things. Yes, but she's not evil. That makes 0 sense. Ryder snapped. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Clementine was waiting for you to come home. She wanted to go look at the wild raspberry bushes. Keiko announced. There was not a single flicker of frustration or indecision in Ajax's features. His queen would handle things. Is that so, my little orange? Extending a hand to her. Surely they aren't good enough to eat yet. But we can have a look. There was a tense, heavy quiet as the king helped the little girl pull on a pair of pink sneakers with lights and then led her out the front door. Once they were gone, Keiko as sunshine fell behind heavy clouds. Hades, maybe your gift doesn't work on humans. Or maybe you can't channel it like you thought you could. Your visions come at night and have been exclusively for werewolves. Maybe it would be best not to base our decision on your findings. Hades didn't waver. That's not entirely true now. I see Nero, the Alpha committing horrible crimes against sirens. Those crimes don't hurt our community specifically, but I still see them. And even if that was true and my powers only work with Nero because he himself is a werewolf, I was still able to force my powers. It took longer and wasn't nearly as smooth. But it worked. I saw her. In the forest hunting us. I saw her parents and even Ryder in her mind. My face flamed instantly, thinking of all of the things he could have seen. The moment on the couch, the giddiness of my first real date, the decision that sex wouldn't matter since we thought we would be dying anyway. Everyone was too focused on Hades to notice me though. I felt her for what she really is and she doesn't feel evil like the others that I've hunted have. I don't understand how this can happen. Ryder groaned, falling onto one of the leather couches. I stayed rigidly in place. Those are my findings. Do what you wish with them. But I have made my decision, and I will not be the one to kill her. Hades stated, You're either queen. You decide. Ryder said to Keiko, because having her alive is torturous. But I was on the brink of killing Hades when he came in. Keiko sucked in a deep breath through her nose as if she were trying to soothe herself. It only made her shoulders tense more, bunching toward her ears. And did you think that mating with her would make these choices and their consequences easier? Chapter 35. We both thought we were going to die. Ryder said nonchalantly. The man he had been me found me in the shed returned. There was no trace of a smile. Not a glimmer of fear. Nothing. I, on the other hand, wanted to curl up and die. Clearly, she had smelled something. Did I still smell like the sex we shared, or had my scent altered because of our mating? Oh Jesus! Did Ajax and Hades both know too? So that made it better? Keiko asked. Would you want to die not knowing what it was like to ever have your mate? Ryder challenged back. You are welcome to be annoyed if you do like. But she was in heat and we decided that it was all right together. I'm not pleased that it landed us in this situation, but I'm not feeling particularly inclined to defend it either. Of all the things happening, I'm not sure this is the worst. Keiko didn't argue, though she did let out a noise of clear frustration. Her hands flicked back her dark hair while her eyes narrowed on me. She was entirely serious and undeniably fierce despite how young she looked with her hair tied back. You're right, but we still need to decide what we are going to do. We surely can't let her go with all of the information she now has on us. Whoever she is working for does not need to know that we have an unkillable werewolf Ryder cleaning up our messes. Clearly, if they made it here, they already know too much. I kept my mouth shut, still standing in the entryway. I would never say it. But part of me questioned who I would even tell at this point. The group would know for certain that the attack had gone belly up and presumably me with it. I hadn't been too involved with the meetings around the move. But by now they would have hopped to another town, all gotten new phones and addresses, and any reasonable trace of them would be gone. Without having some kind of database that was beyond a civilian, I didn't have much hope of finding them. If she was strong enough to get through what you did to her the first time, she's not going to break this time either. Hades piped up. The beast gently placed his hand on my shoulder. I did my best not to recoil. Come on, I know this is hard, but have a seat and let's all talk about this. I numbly did as he asked. We all settled on the couches and armchairs in the living room. I very pointedly took an armchair on the far end. I didn't want anyone to think that they should feel comfortable enough to get close to me, especially not after they had all conspired about how I should or shouldn't be killed. Hades sat on a love seat with Keiko and Ryder kept his couch to himself, though he got up immediately, moving into the kitchen. So you saw my torture techniques then? Keiko asked. Some of them, but it was Noah that told me more. Porkid looked so sickly when I talked to him. Hades explained. Either way, we all know that we aren't to be able to get any information out of her, no matter how hard we try. And now with them being mated, anyone laying an ill-intentioned hand on her could have deadly consequences. We all turned to look at Ryder then, who was too busy digging around the fridge to respond. Well, this is just an absolutely lovely situation, isn't it? Keiko sighed, melting into the soft leather beneath her. My mate gets shot. My child put in harm's way. Several of my subjects murdered. And when we catch the person, I can't do anything about it without fear of getting my own throat torn out. Ryder returned to the sitting area with a glass of water and a small plate of cheese and bread. He thrust both towards me. Oh, thank you. I stammered. He nodded with just a pinch of coldness and returned to his couch. We can't tell her, and we can't do her, and we can't do her loose. Ryder began, and something in me rose to attention. I hated that he was talking about me like I was there. But what I hated more was how focused he was on the rug in front of him. A storm was rumbling within him. That much was clear, but we can use her to our advantage. How do you suggest we do that? Keiko pressed. They won't come after me. I blurted, as if trying to save myself from the misery of knowing what he would subject me to. They'll think I'm dead, and even if they don't, they might just cut their losses. No one seemed to hear me. All attention remained on Ryder. You all would give me information if I asked. Right. Realistically, if she got here, she's high enough in the ranks to know some things and out raising alarm. We can use her to get us more information and access to more of the members of whatever group this is. My heart twisted. Panicked words poured out of me. They have all moved away. That was the plan after this assignment, if it went well or not. All phone numbers have been changed. Maybe even names for all I know. I confessed, because I couldn't sell out the people who kept me alive. I wouldn't. Keiko turned back to Ryder, raising a single eyebrow. Not all of them, Ryder corrected. I had Noah return to the house where I picked you up from a while back. The one you said was yours. Turns out Milo is still there, alive and well. I'm sure he would be so happy to hear you're okay and would be willing to tell you anything you wanted to know. No, I whispered. We can't just release her and hope she comes back with more information. Keiko warned. Don't worry. I'll be there to make sure she stays on a short leave, Ryder stated. Chapter 36. It was all discussed without me. I could have chimed in and said my piece. Hell, I probably should have. I knew in my heart they wouldn't listen though. Who in their right mind would? If the roles had been reversed, Armand and Dawn would have burned all of them at the stake by now. Ryder could have spewed 1,000 reasons why he was good and pure, and none of the hunters would have listened. We'd be having a barbecue to celebrate by this point. So I stayed silent as they argued about the logistics of the options at hand. Ryder would be the one to watch me. As my mate, he wouldn't let anyone else take the honor as the werewolf who had been studying my group the most closely. He would be the best person to see it first hand, Keiko insisted we stay at the cabin with them, under heavy lock and key of course, but there was only one bedroom and Hades feared that news was traveling too fast. A furious werewolf might try to take matters into their own hands, or I could wake up and decide that my task was not completed and slit their throats while they were sound asleep. Hades pointed out that I lived in town, but that was shot down on the grounds that the hunters might still be watching the home and no one other than me knew what weapons lay inside. Ryder was to go to my home and pick up some of my belongings. I needed to look as normal as possible as to not throw off Milo. We would spend the night together in a hotel so we were both in unfamiliar territory. Then we would pay Milo a visit. I didn't say a single word while we were in the car together. Just the two of us driving away from the cabin, the tree where I perched for hours, the shed where I had my fingernails ripped from me. I stared at the nubs, wondering how we would hide them from Milo, but sure that Ryder would come up with some clever plan. He seemed to be full of them now. He asked me what I wanted from my house. I just stared at my reflection in the passenger side mirror and shrugged. He disappeared into the darkness. He returned to the car with a t-shirt, nude underwear, and a clean pair of black leggings. I snagged the clothes and the toothbrush from his hands a little too quickly, knowing that he would read my discomfort so easily. The rental car was left behind in the hotel parking lot. The woman behind the front desk gave me an odd when she saw I was only carrying a plastic grocery bag, but quickly turned her attention to Ryder. I absolutely wondered how many times he had checked into random hotels like this. Duffel bag slung over his shoulder, credit card in hand. The room was small, but nice and had a mountain view. Perfect for tourists who wanted a glorious Instagram post without trekking up a mountainside. However, my eyes narrowed on the singular bed sitting against the wall. You couldn't get to beds. I didn't think you'd carry the way, he reasoned. Well, I do care. A lot actually, about 1,000,000 things. But at this point, this was the hill I felt I needed to die on. Did I not deserve my own space after everything I had been through? Georgia, we've already had sex for God's sake. We've slept in the same bed before. A much smaller one than this. It's going to be fine. How is any of this going to be fine? I demanded. It's a bed. Just calm down. The restraint within me snapped and all of the things that I had kept silent came ripping out of my throat. It's not about the fucking bed. How is any of this going to be okay? I can't go back to my people. I don't even know where they are. And the one that is left is probably going to have to endure this too. I thrust my damaged hand towards his face. They even took my parents with them, promised that they would take care of them if anything happened to me. Georgia, come on. Let's not yell about this here. I don't think the walls are particularly thick, he warned softly. And just for a brief second, I saw the man who begrudgingly cuddled a senior kitten. Then again, that had all been a lie too. Still, he was right. So I lowered my voice. Don't go after Milo. Please, I whispered. I didn't realize that I was welling up until I felt something wet drip down my cheek. I didn't care. Didn't waver. I stared right at him and hoped he saw the crazy complete Ivy girl who laughed aloud at video games. Not a woman who would prefer to use a knife in combat instead of a kitchen. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. George, what do you want me to do? Turning away. Even with Hades' decision, they wanted to kill you. Keiko more than anyone. This is the best compromise that I can think of. I am burning all of my bridges down just to keep you alive. Then just let me go. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I can let you go 100 times. It's not going to matter. That's how the mate bond works. We'll keep coming back to each other. You'll go through your heats 1,000 more times if the moon ghost thinks that's what we need. And even if I could cut you loose, do you honestly think I would? What would you do? You'd go back killing people that are families, that have jobs and purpose in this world just because you're afraid of things that you don't understand. My mouth opened and I prepared to thunder back at him for all I was worth. But then his words stuck me. What would I do? Could I draw another bow? Throw another knife? Knowing that it was going to be buried in someone like Ajax who couldn't coddle his daughter. Like Keiko who screamed the second she knew Ajax was in danger. No, I couldn't. Even when I tried to think of my parents. Mouth flopped open and eyes vacant. I couldn't conjure up the rage that I used to. It had gotten lost somewhere between my fingernail removal and being pinned between a wall and Hades. I guess you wouldn't let me go. Even if I swore on my life not to kill again. I managed. My throat felt like it was closing around each word. No, I wouldn't. Ryder ground out. I couldn't fathom handing over Milo to Keiko and Ajax. I couldn't stand thinking about the fear he would feel with you when he saw Hades. And it would be my familiar smile. The face that he knew and trusted that would send him to his fate. But if Ryder dumped me right now, left me here on my own, what would I do? What purpose did I have? If I was grinding for my parents, if I was hunting down something that had hundreds, maybe even thousands every year, what was the goal? What was my reason to get up every morning and keep fighting? Chapter 37. The explosion diffusing didn't keep us from being at each other's throats for the rest of the evening. I blatantly refused to sleep anywhere other than the bed. You said the same. It didn't matter which one of us snarled or swore more. The other wouldn't budge. You didn't bring me anything to sleep in. I accused, searching for a new barb to jab at him. Milo is going to know if I show up wearing clothes I slept in and I've already been in Keiko's clothes for far too long. You can't throw filthy girl at him and expect him to not be suspicious. Then borrow mine. He ground out. He was already digging through his duffel bag before I could even open my mouth. A University of Alberta's sweatshirt was tossed at me along with a pair of boxers and some grey sweatpants. You just have extras on hand. The hostility that had been in my voice wavered, leaving something softer behind. I could smell his scent along with the botanical detergent. Even before you, I was on the road a lot. I don't really have a home base. The majority of what I have is in here. I turned and walked to the bathroom before I could allow myself to say anything or even just to think about what he had said. Living out of a duffel bag. Driving from one town to the next. Because your home base was gone. I knew the feeling. Pressing on. Living life like everyone else around you was not an option. I remembered all those nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how I would ever heal from what had been done to my family. I was scared to check the date. Like I had been scared of the dark as a child. Life had marched on and I was being left behind. I couldn't escape it. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how fast of a car I drove. And now, I felt like I was right back where I had started from. I shook the thoughts out of my head and climbed into the shower. The water was a little more refreshing since I didn't have an impatient queen waiting for me this time. I scrubbed my skin with the provided bar of soap and could almost hear my mother demanding to know its ingredients. Then I lathered my copper-color hair and rinsed until I felt every bit of the cell and the shed leave my skin. For a moment after my shower, I just stood in front of the foggy mirror. I could see nothing more than my silhouette. I didn't see the lines of my muscle, the shade of my eyes, or the gnarled tangles in my hair, just a vague outline of a person. And for a moment, just for a second, I wished that I had been like my brother. I wished that I had picked up the tatters of my life that were salvageable and moved on. I could have been anyone by now. Could have lived in a sprawling country home, or tiny apartment in the city. Could have driven an Audi coupe or a Dodge Mavan. Could have been a lawyer. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. A nurse, a dermatologist like Mom, and that is where the train of thought faltered. Moving on meant leaving them behind. That was not an option, would never be an option. I hacked the small hotel, provided comb for my hair before considering Ryder's clothes that I had left beyond the counter. It felt so intimate as I slid the cotton sweatshirt over my head. I kept my features neutral as if invisible beings would see and judge my reaction. But having his clothes brush my skin, having his scent swirl around me, it did something to my head. It only worsened as I stepped into the boxes and tugged on his pants. I just gritted my teeth and left the steamy room. Ryder didn't spare me a second glance. As soon as I sat on the bed, he was off his side, going to shower himself. He left the television on. A sports channel played back at me, showing me slow motion reruns of mountain bikers getting throttled down a hill. It was a bizarre thing to watch. They looked like they were holding on for dear life and letting gravity do what it pleased. But there was control in some moments, like it was more about choosing when to struggle and when to simply be. The screen changed to a podium shot. First the women's category, the three of them filthy and dusty, but grinning like mad. Then the men's category, all of them just as dirty as the next. A single bottle of champagne was open. I blinked, and I saw Ida there, at the top of the podium, laughing with goggles around his neck and sweat keeping his dark hair flattened against his forehead. Then I blinked again and it was just some average man with an average smile up there. I pretended to be entirely disinterested in the TV when he returned, rolling onto my side so my back was to him, but still thoroughly staking my claim on the bed. He ignored me and just switched off the TV and the lamp before crawling under the covers. I kept my mouth shut despite the venom growing in my throat. There was a pinch of quiet. I could practically hear him begging me to say something. I refused. I refused to say anything at all. If he wanted to fight over the bed again, he was going to have to start it. I stared straight ahead, focusing only on my breathing and his. Was mine too fast? Did he know how I was feeling right now just from how quickly my chest rose and fell? Was he falling asleep? Or was he going to give up and climb out of the bed to sleep in the chair? I felt like each time I went to clear my thoughts and refocus, they only came back stronger. Through the open curtains I could spy the full moon. Ryder said that the werewolves no longer depended on the full moon for their powers. To a degree, I had already known that. Hunting at night was dangerous. I had only shot down wolves during broad daylight, so clearly the old law was no longer accurate. But how much did I really know about them? How much did Armand and Dawn know about them? I knew that they were mates. I knew that separating them could be deadly. But I never knew that something as simple and as common as sex could change the bond between two people. Though it hadn't been simple and common sex, it had stolen everything from me. It had taken away what I thought was right and correct. And the connection between us was stronger. I knew at the moment I wanted to get in Keiko's face as she tried to comfort Ryder. His breathing had gotten evener from beside me, tepid with a light snore occasionally. This man was the reason I was going to turn Milo in. He was also the very reason I was alive. Keiko would have gutted me like a fish otherwise. Or maybe just let one of her many guards do it instead. There was no denying what he said earlier, that he was burning down bridges to keep me alive. But I could not knowingly trade myself for Milo. He had given up. He had gotten out. I couldn't suck him down into a disaster that I created. He didn't deserve it for a second. And Keiko would not have to be gentle with him. There would be no one to protect him. I could do nothing. Ryder had left his cart keys on his nightstand. My body jerked upright into a sitting position before I could think better of it. Then I froze, mentally cursing my foolishness. Ryder's body jerked then, and I realized that I was screwed. Then he went still again. A twitch of the hand. A crease between the eyebrows. Then stillness. Lips parted. His head tossed to one side. Stillness again. His eyes still closed. A strangled noise left his mouth. A leg kicked outwards. I held my breath, watching it all. Then he started screaming. My first reaction was to leap back, darting out of the bed as if it had caught fire. Something primal in my gut changed then. Hearing his cries like that, seeing his distress, it did something to me that I didn't understand. My body moved under its own influence, going to his side of the bed. He jerked again, his entire body rolling to the other side. His erratic movements didn't stop me from reaching out and placing both palms on either side of his face. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I whispered. His eyes burst open, chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. My hold dropped as he sat up and I took a step back. He frantically surveyed the space around him, hands clutching at the sheets. So where that he was at home, but nowhere was re-home for him. Slowly, ever so slowly, his body loosened. It was a nightmare. Reassuring himself, the strength sucked out of him, he fell back against the bed. I sat on the edge. Whatever you saw, it didn't happen. It wasn't real. I soothed. I wanted to run my hands through his hair or cradle his head in my arms, but stayed perfectly still instead. It was just the mate bond. Nothing more. I could fight it, but it was the moment when I found my parents. It was the first second of seeing them. I begged them to open their eyes. Even with all of the blood, even though it was so clear that they were dead, I begged them to talk to me. Fuck. I held both of them and told them it was going to be okay and they were all ready. A shaky hand reached up, pushing his hair back from his face. His throat worked as he swallowed hard. "Can you hold me?" he blurted. I physically recoiled, so stunned by the ask. "You're my mate. It'll help calm me down," he explained, a little frantically. "I just..." "Move over," I said into the darkness. And when his body shifted away from the edge of the bed to roll onto his side, I laid down beside him and draped an arm over his waist. The little sigh of relief that he gave me was enough to encourage me to curl my legs behind his and rest my forehead against the back of his t-shirt. The keys on his nightstand were long forgotten. Chapter 38. When morning came, I was groggy and my eyes were blurry. The sun was too bright and I wished that I could just slip back into sleep because this was all so perfect. My head cradled against a shoulder blade, my arm over a waist just tight enough that I could feel the soothing motion of breathing. The skin beneath my thumb was smooth as I traced gentle sweeps up and down the bare abdomen beneath the soft shirt. My eyes burst up and I ripped my hand away. Ryder gave a disgruntled groan and rolled over to face me, blinking in a sleepy daze. Even with horror whipping through me, seeing him like this, all ruffled and cozy, twisted something within my chest. "Fuck. Sorry. I didn't realize it's the mate bond." He yawned. How was he entirely unbothered by this? Right. This magical connection between us. I ground out, scrubbing a hand over my face. Christ. Literally in bed with the enemy. You can call it whatever you want, but you were the one that was snuggling me. So it's hard to deny the proof. My molars ground against each other, but I said nothing as I climbed out of the scratch bed sheets. I used the restroom and changed into my clothes for the day, trying to tame my hair with the shitty comb provided. I ended up looking like a gnarled mess until I settled on styling my hair into tight ducked braids that wouldn't budge if I spent the day dangling by my fingers from a cliff's edge. To be fair, a day with Ryder was perhaps a little too comparable. When I returned from the safety of the washroom, Ryder was ready to go. "You're going to be cold," he commented, barely glancing at me. "Yeah. Well, you picked out my clothes. Remember, I wasn't even allowed to go into my own home. I would have opted for something with more coverage. Maybe something that I was so comfortable in. It would have felt like armor." He rummaged through the duffel bag that held everything near and dear to him, retrieving an avian burnt orange flannel. I expected him to toss it me, but he approached me slowly, reaching around me to hold it out. I kept my gaze down, knowing full well that if I glanced up, I might crumple. My arms slid over the soft material, appreciating the warmth immediately. Once it was on, he moved to fix the collar, breath catching when his fingers brushed the side of my neck. A spot of weakness. "Please don't make me do this," I whispered. "You don't know Milo, but he's a good guy. A great guy even." It was the wrong thing to say. Ryder pulled away, leaving me with nothing but the scent of his detergent. "We already went over this. I have to do this, to save me and you. Keiko and Ajax want someone to face a punishment. I won't let it be you. They can't come after me. And even if he's a good guy by your standards, he's still a killer. So am I." "I know," he managed. I know. If playing on the soft side wouldn't work, I was not beyond attacking the jugular. I will hate you forever if you let anything happen to him. I hope you know that. There was not a crack in his FAA to be found. You can either come with me and try to make this as smooth as possible for your dearest friend, or I can take you right back to Ajax and Keiko, and you can determine how hard Milo fought me with how many bruises he shows up with. How's that? I'll tell him you're a werewolf. I shot back. He was the best on the team. Everyone thought so. The only reason that I got sent to kill the royals is because he refused to do it. I don't know if you're trying to tell me that HE is going to kill me or if you're trying to tell me that HE has got a better heart than you. It doesn't matter. I'm going and I will be bringing him back with me. You can either come along or you can go right back to Ajax and Keiko. Those are your only two options. I hate you. I snarled through clenched teeth. Then we rounded up our meager belongings and headed out. My mind raced on the drive. What could I say to Milo? What could I say to Ryder to get him to stop this ridiculous crusade? If I couldn't protect Milo, how was I supposed to protect the others if things came unraveled? What would they all think of me when I sold them the only family I had out? They would hate me for sure. There is no way around it. I could never blame them for it. We can lie to Keiko and Ajax. We can say that he wasn't home or that he moved. I suggested softly. Ryder didn't even flinch. He proceeded to drive up the winding mountain road as if he hadn't heard me at all. Can't we make a deal? Can you bring back all the werewolves you killed? He challenged. So I closed my mouth and decided that Ryder was not the person I needed to waste my time on. If there was any way of getting Milo out of this, it was up to Milo's keen eye for detail and my careful words and clues. Milo's home was before us too quickly and my mind was still spinning out, trying to come up with a plan. I only had one. The little squat home was in front of me too soon. I wanted to sit in the car to rethink my words, to try and consider how best to control my fate. Ryder was out of the car as soon as it was in park. He was knocking on the front door as I was unbuckling my seatbelt, trying to ignore the shaking of my fingers as I went. Milo opened the door. He looked the same that he always had. A little icy, a little too serious for his age, but he had put on a pinch of weight, making him look healthy instead of severe and harsh. Can I help you? I shut the car door, drawing his attention to me instead. His mouth fell open. Is that you?